out there that hope you have a blessed day today. You deserve it. And today's lesson, we're talking about a grand opening. Now, we know as humans that when a store is going to open and we are looking forward to going shopping, and you got that grand opening, we just look forward to celebrating and trying to get stuff as cheap as we can, right? And for all the shoppers, we know that we look for bargains and everything. But it's a good celebration when we are able to do that and with peace. Because you know a lot of times you have problems when you go and they got grand openings and everybody trying to grab the same thing, and some folks will go to jail. So trying to get to the right thing that they desire. So today's lesson, we are talking about a grand opening, right? We're talking about King Solomon. We're talking about him in his grand opening of dedication of the temple, right? And we know that before his dad, David, had told him that's what God wanted him to do. That he wanted Solomon to build a temple and dedicate it to God. So, this lesson is coming out of 2 Chronicles, the 7th chapter, 1 through 7 verse, and chapter 11. Now, when I looked at that unifying topic, it tells us that Solomon dedicates the temple. So, he worked on it a long time, and now it's time to celebrate. They wanted a place where everybody could come and worship. So, he built this temple. Now, in that lesson aid, we see that people honor special places with celebration and gifts. We all know that, right? And Solomon, he dedicated the temple and the altar for the worship of God. Now, David's son, Solomon, honored his father's request to build God a permanent place of worship. Okay? But as the third king and leader of Israel and the monarchy, Solomon also made sure that the religious leaders and God's people were involved in the sacrifice, in the dedication, and the reverence of God. He wanted everybody to participate, right? Now, because of this, it tells us that God's glory, what it did, it filled the temple so much so that not even the priests and the Levites were permitted to enter the temple because of God's glory. That's something to behold. God is all powerful and all knowing, right? And we kind of take it for granted each and every day. We just think we're going to get up the next day and that we still going to be living. But it's a lot of people that will tell you different. Well, they can't tell you because they're not here. So, and as we look at the author of the book of 2 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles was written by Ezra according to Jewish tradition. Ezra was one of the prophets. Now, it was written approximately around 450 BC, and what it did, it recorded the events from the beginning of Solomon's reign as king to the beginning of the Babylonian captivity, when they took them into captivity in place. Now, 2 Chronicles featured the sacred history of the lives and the Ezra. Now, as the author who most scholars think was the prophet Ezra, wrote the stories, and he made the Israelites look good. Mhm. Now, we all know about the Israelites. They sin against God, then they straighten up, and then they sin again, and God will punish them, and then they turn around and say, oh, we're going to do right. Now, his accounts do not stress the disobedient lifestyle of the Israelites as much as the promises that God made with his people. Now, Second Chronicles, it says, describes the dedication of the temple and the response of Solomon's prayer. Now, Solomon, when he was made king, he asked God for what? One thing, right? He didn't want no riches and wealth and all that stuff. He asked him, what did he ask him? Wisdom. It tells us that the abundance of sacrifices offered during this dedication, it reflects the people's gratefulness to desire to honor God. Y'all all know from the other week that they had the dedication of the animals and stuff at the altar, and this is continuing on, right? So when Ezra penned this text, it tells us David, Solomon's dad, had died and passed on to his son Solomon, assuring him that the Lord wanted Solomon to build a temple, a dwelling place where God's people could experience the presence and the power of God. Before they built that, they was kind of moved around. They had temporary deal where the people was trying to worship. They wanted to make a more permanent thing. So in today's lesson, Solomon completed the work of the temple. Now, as Solomon involved the religious servants of the temple and the people, God responded to their sacrifices and dedication of the temple. Now, after Solomon finished praying, he always prayed. He was a praying man. After he finished praying, it tells us that fire descended from heaven and it consumed the sacrifices at the altar, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. You knew that the Lord was there. They did. Now, the priests, they couldn't enter the temple due to the glory, and the Israelites, what they did, they bowed down, praying God. And so Solomon and the people, what they did, they offered sacrifices, and the Levites played musical instruments. So that was a big celebration going on. Now God also promised to establish Solomon's throne if he remained faithful. Because he became king as he started to build this altar, and also a place for him. Now, when we bow before the Lord, okay, y'all with me? We acknowledge God's greatness and our insufficiency. We don't have no kind of power. God has all the power. Now, when the Israelites, it tells us, honored God, they used a well-known phrase, and I quote, "For the Lord is good, his steadfast love endures forever." End quote. And that's Psalm 100 and verse 5. Don't believe me, go look it up for yourself. So as we look at now, we are to the completion of the temple, day of celebration. It tells us as we look at the completion and the temple's dedication, we see that Solomon's reign began with a sincere desire to be pleasing to God. Now, he is known for doing, for asking again God for wisdom so that he could wisely rule God's people. You know, most of us, if God asked us what we wanted, what we going to say the first day, if you could give me $1 million, buy me a house, pay off my house, and give me a new car. Don't ask for no wisdom. We're not going to ask for no wisdom. We looking at material things. And so we know that Solomon was wise for his years. Now this revealed to God that Solomon had his priorities in order. He was looking out for the people and for God. So therefore, God gave Solomon wealth, riches, and honor as well. You see what God will do for you when you least expect it, and when you're doing right. You know, you can ask for things, then he give you more than what you asked for, right? So, because of the wisdom and gifts God had given Solomon, he achieved a lot as king. Now, it took Solomon 20 years to build a temple. It's a long time. Can you imagine if you try to get your house built? And it takes you 20 years? Then you have to live at hotels and wherever else with relatives and friends. And all the time you say, hurry up and get through with my house so you can celebrate, right? So that's the same thing that we were looking at here. Now, again, it took 20 years for him to build a temple as well as his place. Now, the temple became the religious center of the nation of Israel. It symbolized unity among the tribes and the presence of their great God. When believers, we talking about us, right? When believers consecrate themselves in preparation to serve the Lord wholeheartedly, they often feel a sense of accomplishment when the work is completed. I do, you know. I remember me and Sister Hudson was working on this shelf, and both of us had bad knees. And so I was all on the floor trying to screw stuff all upside down, and had to go back and redo. And then missing a screw or so, where did this screw go? And so when we completed it, oh, I was so relieved. I was so relieved. I told Sister, I said, next time, we're going to get somebody to put this together. We are not doing it ourselves. So you feel a sense of accomplishment. Now, 2 Chronicles 7:11, it tells us that it details the days of the celebration along with the mindset of King Solomon as he was able to complete the temple. I know he was glad. Now, the celebration took place, it tells us, over 14 days. And the people who had gathered for the dedication had traveled from a long distance. They wanted to be there. Now, throughout the celebration, they had prayed, they made sacrifices, and praised the Lord. And Solomon, what he did, he made sure that they were fully involved in the worship. Mhm. You know, when you involve everybody, it's just like if you got a church program, where you kind of want to involve everybody in the worship. You know, some people don't believe in getting involved, but it's again, when things are completed, you have a sense of I did good, right? So at the end, it tells us Solomon sent them home after 14 days. Uh, and they were joyful and in good spirits. You know, when people go and they should celebrate and then they leave, we got some of us that, oh, it wasn't what I thought. We always have to throw in that little bit, right? Oh, they should have did this, or they should have did that. It wasn't that great, I shouldn't even went. So, but he sent them home and they were joyful and in good spirits. Why? Because their worship had been valued and they had been blessed by the presence of God. So, as we conclude this lesson, we see that just as the Lord prepared Solomon for additional blessings following his faithfulness, believers too can expect the Lord to do the same things when they have a personal, now you know with me, a personal relationship with Him. You see, when the power of prayer is unleashed, it tells us, sometimes the Lord's presence is so powerful that they might be overwhelmed by the blessing that they receive. That's it. You don't expect that. You know, God is funny in that way. You know, we struggle and then all of a sudden you get something unexpected. And then your heart just lights up. And I always tell Sister Hudson that, you know, when we give, I said, we always get something back when we try to do good and help folks. So you can assure that God will bless you just like He did Solomon. Thank you.